Hi, my name is Lizeth Venegas, and welcome back to another episode of Winter Wednesday, where we interview national finalists to learn how they excelled in their competitive event. Today, I'm here with.
I'm Anishka Gogoi. I'm a senior at Bothell High School.
And I'm Kavi, and I'm also a senior at Bothell High School.
So, just to start this off, what event did you guys place in, and how high did you place?
We
Um,
did data analysis and we placed first at nationals.
yeah. And then previous years, we've also gone to nationals for Intro to Social Media Strategies. And our sophomore year, we also placed first for that one.
Thank you so much. We'll get into the actual questions now. So, just to start us off, what sort of motivated you guys to get into FBLA?
Um, it's actually kind of funny because we were sort of baited into joining. We were both freshmen and we were looking around the club fair. And this girl kind of shoved candy in her hand and told us to go to the informational meeting. And I was kind of unsure. We were looking at a bunch of different events, and because this was a business event, and I wasn't really interested in business, so I wasn't sure if it would be a good fit. But at the meeting, they mentioned FLC, so I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I ended up liking it. So.
Yeah, similar to Anishka, I had a very similar experience with just looking at FBLA and the club fair and going to FLC and really liking all the competitions that people were demoing. So I decided to try it out. And since we were already friends, we decided to do a competitive event together.
That's nice. I'm sure we're all super grateful that you guys did join FBLA. So, moving on to more competition-based questions, sort of like what interests you in data analysis and how did that lead to you choosing this event? Especially since you mentioned that you did intro to social media strategies, and I mean the connection between those two events isn't really direct.
Yeah, so we knew from the get-go that we didn't want to do anything related to social media because we'd been doing it for 2 years and we just wanted a change and a fresh start. So I was really interested in computer science and coding from before, so I knew I wanted to do something in that realm. But Anishka was not that interested in computer science.
Yeah, so for me, what kind of convinced me to go with data analysis was the prompt. It was on wildfires and AQI, and I was sort of like forming an interest in environmental science. So I really liked the prompt. Um, and then for me personally, I think it's really like helpful to sometimes prioritize the prompt over the actual topic because it ensures that you're actually going to be interested in thinking about that topic for months and months and months. So,
Yeah, that's super cool. Okay. So, you guys competed at nationals. How did you prepare for your event leading up to nationals, competing at a bigger stage? Just
I think one thing that really helped from the jump to state to nationals, one thing we did, and we did this previous years as well, we took all of our feedback from states, both the prelims and the finals rounds, and we copy pasted all the judges' comments. And we took each row in the rubric and then added up all those points for every single judge. And it's one thing to kind of flip through your feedback forms and see, like, oh, it was like generally low here, generally high here. And then it's a whole other thing to actually see the numbers added up because it kind of reveals things that maybe you didn't think you were as weak in. And after doing that, we basically just came up with solutions to target every single weak point in our presentation. And also just thinking about the feedback that all the people we presented in front of gave us, not just the actual judges.
Yeah. I
yeah.
think that's really encapsulates the gist of data analysis. But also, we ensured that we were being very creative when we went to nationals because the scale of people competing is obviously much larger. And chances are, if you think of something, other competitors have probably done something similar. And even though data analysis is very technical in nature and it's easy to get caught up in the numbers, we made sure that we were also introducing creative aspects to our presentation. For example, for one of the graphs that we did a moving bar graph, which I think Anishka can explain better, but it made sure that we were keeping our judges engaged with our presentation.
Yeah. You'll see it in the demo, but yeah, I think things like the moving bar graph, we had some overlapping heat maps and cool things like that. So
Yeah.
just keep it varied.
Yeah, I remember being very engaged when you guys practice in front of me. Okay, so now just sort of more a general FBLA question. How did FBLA help you develop your leadership and just your confidence in general?
That's a great question. I think especially for public speaking, like I know that's kind of the obvious answer, but before we had never really done really anything public speaking, and doing these presentations, obviously it's timed and you kind of go by a script, but just learning how to deliver your points effectively and keep a judge engaged, especially a judge who's been judging for like 6 hours and doesn't want to hear the same like 3 points over and over again. So I would say the presentation parts definitely helped me a lot.
Yeah, and I think this will sound cliche, but truly FBLA, I think before FBLA, it was hard to be confident in what I was saying. And like even just being in this interview, I think I would have been a lot more nervous about it if I hadn't done FBLA for so many years. And obviously I'm also a state officer and I work with you, Lizette, but I think all of those things, just learning how to speak in front of a crowd will help me like forever and ever. And it's nice to know that I don't no longer feel like nervous to present in front of people and having that confidence in myself.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for your answers. Those were good. So, what advice would you guys give to someone competing in this event for the first time?
I think one thing that helped was spending a lot of time researching how data analysis is actually conducted in real life. Because obviously, Kavya knew coding before, but it's one thing to know how to do like all the graphs, and then another thing to know how data analysis is conducted in real life in the business world. So I would say having a research period, just obviously all the topics, but doing that portion as well is really helpful for data analysis. What else, Kavya?
I think also researching the tools that you have at your disposal, because at least for us, I know that when we went into data analysis, we were like, oh, it's going to be super coding focused. And while we did have to do some coding, there was many tools. For example, Flourish is one I can think of where it basically makes graphs for you using data. But tools like that can really help you even if you're not very good at coding. And honestly, I think you could compete in this event without doing any coding at all. So just knowing that, not being intimidated by the fact that it's very technical and just realizing that there's so many tools, is a piece of advice I'd give.
Yeah, another, I guess, more general piece of advice is don't be afraid to sort of change your whole presentation from regionals to state to nationals. And the reason I mentioned this for data analysis specifically is there were so many elements of our presentation that we had spent hours and days and weeks like getting the data for, making the visualization, writing the script for, and then we ended up having to cut it. And it's just, I think it's a good idea to just keep an open mind and don't get attached to your presentation, because I think every single round, all 3 years of FBLA, round to round, we change like 80 to 90% of our presentation. So that's I think this advice is especially prevalent to data analysis because you'll spend a lot of time on each visualization. So you need to learn to let go sometimes.
Yeah. Also, don't be afraid to do something that's kind of out of the ordinary and like take risks with your presentation. For example, we did this our sophomore year as well. We were kind of thinking about what could help us stand out. And Anishka, I remember she randomly just had an idea to include music in our presentation. And at first, it seemed like a very strange idea. And we were like, that's kind of weird, but I think after actually implementing it and after giving it thought, it ended up being something that was really unique and that I think the judges also found amusing and interesting. So just don't be afraid to do something that might be a little bit weird because it might actually help you.
Yeah, I feel like this competition is so intimidating that a lot of people aren't really willing to go outside the norm. So that's pretty cool to hear. Uh, For, again on data analysis, can you walk us through what the data analysis event was like and what your project was focused on?
Yeah, so to overall just summarize the prompt, it was about air quality in New York City after Canadian wildfires. So there was wildfire smoke blowing in from Canada to New York, and it was causing air quality issues. And our job was to basically provide recommendations to improve this in the future.
Yeah, and as for like the presentation itself, we started off with defining the problem and what it meant for humans, and we focused on the health side and also if it affects certain communities like low-income neighborhoods. And then we analyzed short-term threats, gave a recommendation, long-term threats, gave a recommendation, how to track those recommendations through KPIs and machine learning models. We talked about what would be needed to accomplish our recommendations and then ended with our data analysis process. And I think throughout, what helped us stand out for sure is we just had a huge variety of graphs and visualizations. We also included global case studies, and that's like one example of one thing. I think for the state round, we took away a lot of our global case studies, or we changed them or something. And then for nationals, we actually put them back in. So again, just being flexible with how your presentation evolves over time. And then another thing was we did a street cleaning demo. This definitely helped us stand out. We kind of embarrassed ourselves for like 20 minutes and swept the streets near Kavya's like house, and then put that in and attached some data to it. So um, yeah, I think that's like the overall, like almost everything we did summarized in our presentation.
Yeah. It was the addition of the video was really good, I feel like. So, also on your project, what was the biggest challenge you faced and how did you overcome it?
Yeah, so the biggest challenge was definitely finding data because a lot of the data that you find on the internet will either not really support your needs or be very have a lot of miscellaneous information that you might not actually need. And I know that FBLA provides you with some data sets, but they're definitely not enough if you're trying to excel because it just doesn't have all of the information that you would need to make all of your points. So what overcoming this was a lot of just looking at what other people did. For example, I remember researching studies people have conducted at universities and seeing what types of graphs they use and taking inspiration from that and taking the data from their studies as well. And we also had to combine data sets a lot. So removing the information from one data sets and keeping the information that was needed from one and then seeing what was needed from another one and then merging it together. So it was a lot of cutting and copy and like mixing everything, like mixing all the data sets together and just being creative with what we had.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of students feel intimidated by data analysis. So, what would you say to someone who wants to start but just doesn't know where to begin?
Yeah, I think I can answer that question since I had none of the technical skills for this event going into it. And obviously I had Kavya, who's a computer coding whiz. But as she said earlier, you really actually don't need to know how to code if you want to do this event. You can do it entirely through third parties like Flourish and still have a very impressive project. I think only maybe like 40% of our graphs are actually code, and that's like a high ball. So just be reassured by that if that's your worry. And then making sure that you make time for a research period. It's probably maybe too late for regionals, but if you're thinking about state and nationals, again, researching how data analysis works. And I think overall, like the biggest key to our success, not just in data analysis, but any event, is really going ham on the planning. Because if you can plan everything out well, it really just helps you give reassurance. And for such a big project like data analysis, I think that's especially key. So,
Okay. So, just again on during the process of your presentation, was there a specific resource that you two relied on heavily during your creation process?
Yeah, I think we've mentioned this one or two times before, but for tools that we use Flourish a lot, and it just made the visualizations creating process a lot easier. But yeah, I'm not sure about resources specifically. I think we like we said before, we saw how people did it in the industry and went off of that. But I don't know if you can think of anything else, Anushka.
In terms of just like slides making, we use Canva, which many people do, but I know like personally us as freshmen, all of middle school, we only use Google Slides. So it's really intimidating to sort of switch over to Canva. And if that is you, I would recommend switching over between regionals and states because it's a pretty big gap for most areas in Washington, and you can really get over that learning curve. So Canva and yeah, I don't know. Our data sets were pretty scattered, not intentionally. It's just that we needed specific data, so it just ended up being pretty varied. So
Yeah. Okay, so, also during the process of, the creation of your presentation, was there a moment where you felt stressed? And if so, how did you two handle that?
Um, this is kind of a story from nationals. I guess it's the creation process. So, but okay, basically during the prelims round, you're not supposed to leave any papers with your judges, of course, and we had never had left papers before. But what happened during the prelims round is we left our paper aids with the judge, and then at the end I was like about to take it, or I asked like, "Oh, can I take this from you now?" or something, and the judge just said, "Oh no, I'll keep it." And
Yeah.
then we were just, and then
And
we
then
were,
we had all of our extras on the side of the table, so we forgot
yes,
to pick it up. And so
yeah,
we had none of our paper eights after leaving the
yeah.
presentation.
So, and then because it was like we've done this so many times, so our routine is so drilled in. That's kind of why we forgot the extras as well. Um, so it was stressful because the next coffee was busy with state duties. So the next morning I woke up at like 6 or 7, and then I had to like walk to like FedEx, and then but FedEx was too expensive, so I went to UPS. I walked like 2 miles or something, and I had to print, and it was really expensive, so that was stressful. So I think to prevent that, I guess like know the rules and don't let adrenaline get the best of you. But other than that, I feel like during the creation, we've kind of got it down pat because of our planning skills that we've acquired throughout the year. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think I didn't feel particularly stressed anytime during the creation just because just starting early and planning a lot beforehand is helpful, but I think just doing a new event and having such a technical aspect to it was slightly stressful at times, but just knowing that we had time to resolve all the issues was helpful.
For sure.
So, was there, or what is a skill that you think is either, either technical or personal that you think helped you win, first place?
Yeah, so like separating ourselves from actual data analysis, this is applicable to every FBLA event, but just your public speaking skills, because at a certain point, the content of your presentation matters, but it's also how you deliver it, which makes a really, really big impact on the judges. So something I think, and the only way you can really improve your speaking skills are just by practicing. And we had that experience from previous years. And something that also works for us is having like a word for word script. So I know that doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for us because we were able to kind of memorize it and then practice it over and over again, which helped us become confident in what we were saying. So instead of focusing on the actual words, we were more focused on the way that we were delivering it. So like our body language and our facial expressions and just how we were communicating with the judges.
Yeah. Another thing that I think was critical to our wins was we ensured that we present in front of a lot of people. So there were a couple teachers, a couple friends, some family members, but it was mostly people that we don't actually talk to that much. So one thing we did was like I asked my parents if they had any friends who maybe their jobs are related to data analysis, and then we would hop on a Zoom call and present in front of them. I think just having a huge variety of people, because you never know what sort of judge you'll get. Some of the judges really focus on your words, some really focus on your slides, some really focus on your delivery. And so just practicing in front of each of those archetypes really helped. And then the Q&A process is also very important because it's one thing to deliver a word for word script and then immediately switching over to on the spot thinking. That was a skill that one took us years to develop, I think. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think question and answers are also, you can practice that by presenting in front of a lot of people, and then they all have different questions for you to answer, and you can get used to answering on the spot.
Yeah.
So this question's a little more personal, I guess. Has winning this event changed your goals after high school?
For me personally, I've always been someone who kind of likes a lot of different topics. And one thing I really liked about this one is while we were researching about kind of the people side of these environmental causes, I was really like interested in, we talk a lot about like low income neighborhoods and a bunch of these social factors. So it kind of inspired during like college application season, thinking about my future. Um, like I think currently I'm interested in pursuing something related to like environmental engineering, which of course is very related to this event, and then sort of how that affects social factors. So for me personally, I think this event really encapsulated a lot of what I currently think I might do in my future. And then I don't know, I think for Kavya, probably just reiterated her
Yeah.
interests.
Yeah, I think something that I can think of is that like obviously AI is a really big part that's like growing, and we did some AI stuff in our presentation with like we trained a machine learning model to predict the results of our recommendations, for example. So doing that really just reiterated my interest in pursuing artificial intelligence and looking at that. But yeah.
Yeah. So here's our last question. We're finally wrapping it up. Uh, is there anything else you would like to tell our members about data analysis? Just
Um, I actually looked at the prom this year, and I want to tell people who are doing it this year that you guys got a really cool prompt. It's on like planning the LA Olympics or something, which I think is a universally very interesting and relevant prompt.
Yeah.
So I would, I guess, tell people to have fun with it since the prompts can really facilitate that. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Just look at also after we do our demo, you should, I think, look at our bar chart race. That was also really interesting. I like that graph a lot. You guys should include it in your presentations. But I think that's it.
yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, both of you, both Anishka and Kavya, for doing this presentation and helping our members learn how to excel at data analysis. I really appreciate you guys.
Hi, we're going to present our data analysis presentation. And basically, how we would start it off, we would enter the room, shake their hand, and Kavya would hand out this executive summary, which is just a summary of our entire presentation, and these business cards, which kind of just help lean into the whole role play aspect. And we would also leave a coding documentation packet, which we'll show at the end. And we would just tell them that they would be referencing it later on. And finally, we would set up this poster. Right now it's flipped to the wrong side, but later on we'll flip it back. And that's pretty much how we spent our prep period. So now we're gonna begin the actual presentation. Right.
New York City, a city of opportunity, a city of dreams, a city whose skyline is recognized around the world. But in June of 2023, that skyline disappeared. The city was engulfed in a hazy, apocalyptic smog, reaching the worst air quality in the world.
Not what you would expect, right? What happened to cause this anomaly? Hi, my name's Nishka Gogoi.
And I'm Kavya Tayal.
And we're here to represent Big Apple Analytics, a data analytics firm dedicated to turning data into decisions. Today, we present to you Healthy Clean Air for All, a data analysis of New York City's air quality with actionable recommendations.
So, what is the problem we are trying to solve? New York City's air quality is impacted by both acute and chronic threats. One major acute threat is wildfire smoke. Chronic threats include emissions from transportation, outdated residential heating, and more.
These threats can pose many concerns to human health. As shown in these pie charts, air pollution is a major cause of numerous serious health conditions and is even classified as a human carcinogen.
This scatter plot shows the relationship between AQI levels and a health impact score, which is calculated using hospital admissions, cardiovascular cases, and respiratory cases. As you can see by the line of correlation and high R value, as AQI increases, so does the health impact.
These threats can disproportionately affect low-income communities, which we'll be prioritizing later on in our final recommendation. The heat map on the left shows the percentage of impoverished neighborhoods in New York City. The heat map on the right shows general AQI levels. As you can see, these two maps clearly overlap, and a strong bivariate Moritz-I correlation confirms a statistically significant value.
But what actually causes air pollution? One major source is acute threats from wildfires. As shown in this moving bar graph, in June of 2023, New York City temporarily had the worst air quality in the world, which was caused by the smoke from nearby Canadian wildfires. This is confirmed by the spike in this time series analysis. The p-value or probability of this deviation happening by chance is almost zero, indicating that the Canadian wildfires were the direct cause of this spike in AQI. With this in mind, let's explore our recommendations for responding to these acute wildfire threats.
First, we suggest conducting immediate street cleaning after fires, especially concentrating on those impoverished neighborhoods from earlier. To test the efficacy of this method, Big Apple Analytics ran a small-scale cleaning demo. We started by sweeping a dusty road and finished by flushing it with water to prevent particle resuspension. An air quality monitor was used to track pollutant levels during this process.
You can see in this line graph how pollutant levels initially spiked mid cleaning as the dust was swept around, but then steadily decreased. Our second proposition will be to implement clean transit days. On these days, vehicles will have to meet strict emission standards or pay a fee in select areas. Additionally, public transit will be temporarily discounted to promote increased ridership amongst low-income communities.
Public transportation is important because while wildfires are the primary drivers in AQI spikes, reducing emissions from other sectors is just as important. For example, Sao Paulo saw a carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxide levels drop by 50% after increasing public transit ridership in three different districts, proving its importance. All right, now that we have addressed the acute threats, let's talk about the chronic ones. As shown in these pie charts, one major contributor to air pollution is residential heating emissions. In New York City, these account for 17% of greenhouse gas emissions, which is over 3 times the national average.
The negative effects of these heating systems are exacerbated if the systems are outdated. In China, Beijing decided to upgrade their systems and as a result saw a strong downward trend in pollutant levels over 10 years, as confirmed by the Mann-Kendall statistic of negative 0.85.
So, how can New York City implement clean heating for themselves? Our recommendation is to carry out a phased plan alongside the wildfire response plan from earlier. The first step would be to secure funding, followed by a gradual rollout of upgraded cleaning units over the next 5 years. Finally, we'll propose a citywide ban on all outdated heating by 2030. All of these recommendations will prioritize low-income communities to ensure that there is truly healthy, clean air for all. To measure progress on our plans, we'll be tracking KPIs or key performance indicators. For our wildfire response plan, we'll target an 18% increase in public transit use and a 10 microgram per cubic meter decrease in PM2.5 levels. For the phase plan, we'll aim for 100,000 units converted to clean heating and a 3.5 microgram per cubic meter decrease in PM2.5 levels, all by 2030.
To design our KPIs and project our phase plan's impact, we trained a machine learning model to predict PM 2.5 levels after implementing clean heating. The yellow line shows predicted levels after our plan's implementation. As you can see, switching to clean heating is effective in reducing pollution. We use similar models to predict our other KPIs as well. The necessary resources for these initiatives will start with financial investment. The New York City Fire Department has continuously spent more than its projected budget made during annual fiscal plans, leading to an increased budget every year. This extra money will allow us to feasibly fund our own initiatives. We would request the city about 0.25% of their annual budget, or around $6 million for pilot funding, with similar requests from other departments.
Strong partnerships for both the wildfire response and phase plans will also be needed, and may also involve the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, Department of Sanitation, various housing authorities, and etc. Finally, equipment and supplies will also be needed, plus personnel to carry out the labor itself.
Now, to conclude, let's walk through our data analysis process. We started by searching for raw data from credible sources such as NYC.gov, Kaggle, and others. After exporting the raw data into Google Sheets, we determined if it needed cleaning. If it did, we used Python through Google Colab to clean and merge datasets. Final visuals were then created using Python, Flourish, and Canva. To see more details about this process, please look through our documentation.
We began with the image of a city in crisis, but it doesn't have to stay that way. Here at Big Apple Analytics, we believe in the power of turning
Data into decisions
to create effective solutions. So, together, let's restore our skyline to the clear, bright future it deserves.
Thank you, and here are the research sources we used. We will now open the floor to questions.
All right, time-wise, that was about 6:57. We'll quickly show our documentation that oh wait, first let's look at the poster. So that's the poster behind us right now.
Yeah, so it just goes over all of the recommendations that we had, and then we flip it in the middle just for some more dramatic effect. And then now we're going to look at our documentation that I mentioned, which kind of just goes through how we made all of our graphs and what the process was like. So we just give it to the judges to flip through as we're talking or at the end while we're answering questions.
Yeah, and this time my hands were occupied, but normally when I talk about having, during the street cleaning demo, having an actual air quality monitor, I would just flash it up with our hands. And that's pretty much all the elements to our presentation.
Yeah. Thank you for watching.